This week, I've got some new ideas for spinning our stamps. Let me show you. Let's start simple by just swapping out a flower or shape stamp for a word. I chose this happy word from scrapbook.com because it fits between these two lines on the wheel. These lines represent an eighth of the wheel, and this position means I won't get overlap when I turn and stamp it 8 times. I also know that the circle line is a circle that measures about 3 3/4 of an inch, so that'll fit nicely on an A2 card panel. Now, as it turns out, I started with red. But the way that I turned my wheel meant that I needed to work backwards through my rainbow, or I guess have a backwards rainbow. And while I'm doing this, I want to let you know that all of my ideas will work equally well with the Altenew stamp wheel if that's what you've got. Although I do want to talk a bit more about that when we get to idea number 5. So that's a simple start. To finish this card, I added a stacked up birthday die cut from Waffle flour and a few colorful gems. Now let's step it up. Instead of a word, how about individual letters? I don't have a lot of alphabet stamp sets, but I do have this retired set from Fawn. I want to spell happy, so I'll start from the center of the word with the second P. Again, I'm using the etched lines on the lid to help me with the placement. I've got it centered between 2 vertical lines and just inside the circle line. Because I'm not spinning this one stamp 8 times, it's important to have a way to make sure that I can get all the letters to be on the same circle, if you know what I mean. Using that line, whether you want to be on it or inside it or outside of it, will help with that. You could stamp the word once just to create an arc, but I decided to turn the wheel 4 times and stamp the bottom half of the circle as well. The bottom arc will be upside down, and if you don't like that, you can just reposition your stamp on the bottom half of the lid on that same circle line and still centered between the 2 vertical lines. As I moved out, I was able to ink up 2 letters at once, since they were far enough apart to ink up with different colors without having to mask. My rainbow is definitely backwards on this one, but there's nothing saying you even have to use more than one color if you're finding it confusing like I obviously was. Now, I could have completed the circle with solid dots and more colors if I wanted to, but I had an idea for a big birthday word die cut. I don't actually have one, but I do have this giant happy birthday to you die from Fawn. I've cut off the to you before and used happy birthday, but I've never trimmed it down to just one word like I'm doing today. The wonky font makes it easy to do, and any imperfections in your cutting make it just look like it's part of the font. But once you start trimming off these extra words, the B and the I become separated. It's just important to remember that when it comes to spacing the word on your card. Now, I didn't even add any embellishments to this one. Ooh, if you had the right person, you could put their name on the bottom part of the circle instead of another happy. There's lots of ideas for this one. Now here's an interesting one. When you're making a wreath out of die cuts on your card, you probably trace a circle die with a pencil, right? And then you have to remember to erase it later so it doesn't show. Well, how about using a tiny dot stamp? Here I'm stamping it in a mid-tone gray to make it easy for you to see it on the video, but you can use your very lightest ink to ensure that it never becomes visible. Once the dots are stamped, you can use them to place your die cuts. I've chosen these flowers from Crafty Meraki. They have a small center that easily covers the dots, but look, no lines in the spaces between the flowers. Now, I'm not saying you would buy a spinning tool for this feature, but I do think it could be very useful. I cut some flower centers from an old gel print and an old unknown die that I've had forever. That's a row of dots. I got a real mix of colors and I glued them down with the idea of mixing them up a bit and not just having all the lightest and darkest together. I cut a simple happy word from LDRS Creative from that same gel print and I stacked it up and glued it onto the panel with some of the petals over top of it. And then I stamped a script birthday stamp from Mama Elephant in brown ink just under the word. I finished this one with some golden gems scattered around the flowers. Next, here's an idea for getting 2 different looks when spinning the same stamp. Normally, if you're wanting to make a wreath, you might put the stamp kind of horizontally and even try to bend it a little to get a rounded shape. Stamp that 8 times and you get a very pretty, very full wreath. To make this one a little special, I used another old gel print from my stash and some flower dies from the Crafty Meraki wreath set. Each die has all the pieces to make one flower, so you don't have to worry about which piece goes with which flower. I find that the variations in colors on the gel prints always make these flowers look very special and unique. To finish, I trimmed the stamp panel with a circle die, stamped my favorite Avery Elle circle birthday sentiment, and added some gold splatter and gems. This is pretty, but it's pretty much what you would expect from a wreath made with a leafy stamp. So here's another option. Place the stamp vertically with the stem in the center of your design, then turn that. Now I am making it a little more exciting by using a rainbow of inks, but by the end you get a very different look with some interesting overlaps too. I trimmed this one down to a square, and then to make the most of that circle pattern in the center, I cut it with a circle die and I popped that up before adding a smaller circle with the same happy birthday stamped on it. For my final idea, I started with a small star stamp from a Christmas set from Simon Says Stamp. I made my circle design quite small. In fact, I won't even be able to see it when I'm stamping it down since it's behind the turning mechanism in the center of the wheel. I stamped in red and turned 8 times to complete my design. And then I moved my cardstock. You can move it precisely by using the grids on the sticky sheet, but I decided to be wild and go a little more randomly. I stamped the next circle of stars in yellow, and then I moved the cardstock again, and this time I stamped in blue. I kept going, moving the cardstock and just trying to fill in the colors where it seemed to make sense. And this is the one I want to talk about with respect to the Altenew stamp wheel. That tool has borders around it, and you can't stamp with any of your panel edges hanging out, so that may limit how far from the center you can make your design. But I'm sure you can still do a variation of it. Or you could just start with a smaller panel of cardstock. In this video, I've been using slightly bigger panels, 5.5 inches square, to allow for the fact that I may not always get the panels completely centered before I start stamping, and also to give me some options when I'm cutting down the panel to create my cards. Now, to be honest, when I finished this panel, I didn't love it. It felt super busy in a celebratory fireworks kind of way, but still quite busy. When I put my black and white die-cut stamped sentiment on it, it got lost, even as bold as it is. I stamped another circle design with a star in red on a red panel of cardstock, and then I cut a circle from that. This gave my sentiment some breathing room, but the stamped tone-on-tone stars also gave some continuity with the background. I added lots of gems to really get some sparkle. Would you try any of these? These ideas are fun as they are, but I think they're also a great jumping off point for even more possibilities. I can't wait to see what's next. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.